Welcome to Taking the Rams by the Horns, a podcast that takes current affairs out of current affairs. This is a partnership with Sowetan Live. I'm your host, Rams Mabote. Before we get into today's topic, I need to say this. You know, I suspect it's an age thing. A lot of you have subscribed to the previous iteration of this podcast on audio. It is now on YouTube. Press subscribe on YouTube. The fact that you subscribe to the other one does not mean you've done the other job for this one. As a belief toch. So, you know, there are many problems in this country. We can mention a lot. Kaiser Chiefs, Judge Ratamokot being a racist, him apologizing, not apologizing. But there's certainly one matter that has been constant for 400 years plus. Race. We are battling to deal with race in this country. It is a matter that we sweep away, we shy away from. When we try to handle, we probably are reckless about it. Now there's an organization, a movement calling itself the Human Bridge Movement. And they are looking to racial healing as their project. Well, methinks they're trying to solve something that's solving. But they think I'm wrong. So I thought I'll bring the Chief Executive Officer of the Human Bridge Movement, and disclaimer, who happens to be my friend, because I think she's crazy to be doing this work, so she's going to have to account to everyone. Nyeleti Magadze is my guest today. Hello.
Hello.
How are you? How are you, my friend?
I'm good. How are you?
Good to see you on television, on something that's moving.
Wow.
What is the Human Bridge Movement in your words? Because I think mine may have done you a bad job.
Before I answer that,
Yeah.
I have a question. How many people had to say no before I could be sitting on this chair?
Well, I was dropped. Well, you got into no. Nobody says no to me.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
But people do postpone, cancel, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
So you're always gonna come to this chair.
Yeah.
But you came sooner because somebody dropped me for this episode. So I thought, okay, why not come sooner?
Okay.
You can do that with friends. You must actually use it.
That's the thing. That's what I
Yeah.
thought. So, I'm being used as a feeler here. But, if a friend is calling,
I think you've
what
been
do you
racist.
do?
Let's get to the issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yes, I'm crazy enough to think we can probably move the dial a little bit with this race conversation. Because I think, like you said, we sweep this stuff under the carpet. There's people saying, I don't see race. I don't see color. Color doesn't matter to me. If you are our age group, there's no way you can claim
Yeah.
race doesn't matter to you, right? It defines a lot of who we are and how we are treated and how we treat each other. For the past 400 years, that has been that hierarchy of white on top, black at the bottom, and colored and Indian in
Cappuccino.
between.
Yeah.
Or even the Irish coffee concept, yeah? And as a result of that definition and therefore what you get out of whether it's education, healthcare, access to opportunities, your race was the first thing that would either put you in the right place or not. Was and still is.
Yeah.
And this is why I believe it still is. In 94, we all got to vote. I was 20 and I made my ex. But I was doing my fourth year
Adversity. Yeah.
right? Because we passed.
You went to school early, right?
Yeah, I
But
was.
let's not digress.
my
I think
parents
people,
were
you probably,
teachers.
I
Yeah.
was about to say that. That unfair advantage.
Yeah, exactly. Started to school at 5 and passing
We were
matric at
10 back.
16.
No, let him come later. He's
Yeah,
still young.
yeah. He still has to mature a little bit, yeah. And when I voted with my parents in Limpopo, Kamalamlele at that time, there's no way that you could think all our problems are solved because we've now all had a one man, one vote,
Yeah.
right? My counterparts who were 20 years old, white males and women who were also voting at that point, the education system had invested probably 10 times more in them than it did with me. So there was no equal playing field. There was no let's just move on, it's now all done. And I think in the past 30 years, we haven't done ourselves justice with this conversation at all because the foundation of everything that we see today that is problematic in our society, all our societal issues, the underlying issue is race.
A lot of, no, maybe not a lot because I can't prove that, but let me say a lot of those who disagree with you we'll say, yeah, but we're too obsessed about race. There are many other things, and they'll then, tell about corruption and bad governance and, potholes and stuff. And therefore, coming up with race is just, what's the word? Yeah, but you're wasting time, sort of, right?
I get it, because those are the problems of today.
Yeah.
But if you look at even the problems of today, depending on where you sit in that hierarchy of race, your problems are different. You worry about potholes because you've got a car to drive to work. Someone worries about their safety, where they have to wake up at 3 o'clock, get on a train, and go and
Sweep your house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So even the nature of problems today, the underlying issue was this racial segregation that got us to where we are today. I have this concept of being an outsider. I was born as an outsider. I was born in Gazankulu. I wasn't a resident of South Africa.
Yeah, you're born in a free country.
Yeah, I was born in my own homeland of Gazankulu, right? And I wasn't a South African citizen. 94 happened, allowed all of us to feel like we are South African citizens. But the reality is, a lot of us had to scramble to become relevant and have pothole problems today. And through that scrambling, part of it, hard work, a lot of it, luck, and just being in the right places, because there are a lot of people who've worked hard and still haven't made it.
Yeah.
We got to where we are today so that we have pothole problems. But it's not because the system was geared for us to succeed. We just had to survive, and like I say, have the time, have someone who was willing to let us in. And as a result, a lot of us were doing this fitting in business just so we can make it. That's what I think. A movement like ours will start getting people to have these real conversations. Because we talk about, where we come from, there was a lot of people who did wrong, and therefore we need retribution, right? Pay for the past wrongs. Then we talk about reconciliation, right? Let's now have a civil conversation. Let's talk to each other.
Kumbaya.
Let's kumbaya and tell each other that we love each other. But that's not where it ends. The reconciliation should result in integration. And no one talks about integration for this country. So as a racial healing, we say shift mindsets of people by getting them to have conversations with each other. These people, most of them are responsible for systems and structures that either give certain people access or not, limit who gets what, and decide. If they have shifted their mindsets around how do we solve these problems that we have, which the underlying cause is race, we won't have the integration or the integrated society that we think we all deserve.
So I'm going to go through some of the things in this book that is pretty much the foundation of what you guys are doing, right?
Yes.
But before I go there, wouldn't it be just simple to arrest racists, just like get them to jail?
Where does it say that racism is a crime in South Africa? You only arrest someone if they do.
Well, I'm saying, shouldn't it be a crime?
Well, we can declare it a crime, but then we're not solving the structural issues. The racists are sitting in their comfortable spaces, spewing racism to black people.
Yeah.
You arrest them, you put them in jail, and then what? The black person who was being sworn at doesn't get the justice.
Must get their house.
They get the retribution of you pay for your sins.
Yeah.
But justice is removing the things that enable a racist or white racist to still think they are better than a black person. And what are those things?
Everything. Right? Everything.
It
So,
is.
I like this part, right? That there are things that you want to challenge people to do.
Yeah.
Like, one, educate yourself to be more aware of race-related issues.
Yeah.
I like that, but I'm like, who is not aware of race-related issues?
We think race-related issues are the big things that we see on TV, someone sitting at a beach somewhere and saying, oh, this is nice, there are not black people here, right? Those are just the tip of the iceberg. The real issues are everyday experiences, right? That there are certain things that are okay when they're happening to black people. Right? Black people are the ones who have to wake up and get into a taxi. Black people are the ones that you see walking in the streets at 4 a.m. because they're trying to get somewhere.
And do you know what? Those black people who go there to clean those houses,
Yeah.
there are not even footpaths. So you expect these people to go and work at your homes, and you didn't create footpaths for them.
Exactly. And we've normalized that, right? And as black people, when we now have positions of power to do something about that, we don't, because we've normalized it.
Well, we have to eat, but let's not digress.
This is the thing,
Yeah.
you know. So for me, that education is about saying what of who I am represents what could be racist, whether black or white. You know, we don't argue about whether black people could ever be racist or not. I don't want to go there. But I'm just saying, in the things that we do, you know, racism has another layer in South Africa in terms of structure. It's class.
Yeah.
And in the class layer, color is not a factor
Yeah.
anymore, because you and I...
Because I'm
in
also
that
then
class-
I'm in the same neighborhood where
Yeah.
the woman who comes to clean my house has got no
privilege,
footpaths,
right?
I'm also in that
Privilege
state.
is a layer of that comes on top of racism. So for me, is you go to the source of racism, and then you also then start tackling the things that have been co-opted into racism structures, and people who have been co-opted, like you and I, into those structures, because we are succeeding in a racist structured
Yeah. Well,
environment.
we've brought ourselves out of the troubles
Yes.
of racism,
Yeah.
haven't we?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have. You know, and is that sustainable? No. Is it systemic? Not yet. And this is why we think these kinds of conversations, and these are not just dialogues amongst people who are the same. I always say we are in such unusual times that you need to find yourself in rooms with people you never thought you'd
Well,
ever be
that
in
was
a
the next
room
thing,
with.
because you're saying you must interact with people from different race groups,
Yeah.
which also means people you are not always interacting with.
Yeah.
But Ose Miriam, who cleans up at the house next door, you know, Billy Joel, I'm giving people names here, will tell you, but I interact with these people every day. He's my boss. She's my boss's wife. They're my boss's children. I bathe them. I even make food for them.
Yeah.
And when I'm done, I sleep with the pig.
Yeah. Therein lies the problem, right? Because that interaction is not a peer-to-peer interaction. I need something from you, which is to clean my house. You need me to pay you. And as a result, there's a level of cohesion that happens that is very superficial.
Yeah.
You know, I still sleep in the room at the back. I still have my own gate to come in so that I'm not a nuisance to you. I eat different food to what you eat. I don't socialize with you. When you have your party, I'm in the kitchen with my apron and everything else. I don't even get to eat the food that sometimes I prepare for the people that you are hosting. So the playing field is not equal in terms of that engagement, you know. And when I leave, Miriam leaves and she goes to her hometown where she had to leave her children to come and look after my children. Now I'm putting myself in there as a black person because that's the reality as well. I don't have the sense of what their reality is, or I make myself a proxy for it. You know, I have maybe, I won't call it generations, but layers in my own life. You know, as a black woman, I can never claim to understand the plight of a black woman who made our coffee today. Nor could I understand the plight of my daughters who were born into privilege, that I think I can represent all three. We're all three black women, but our plights are different. And sometimes when we say talk to people who don't necessarily look like you, but also people who don't see the world the same as
Not
you.
of your generation,
Generation.
not your past, not your...
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and those generational interactions, that's where I learn a lot. I see the world through the eyes of my children, better than the lens of my parents or even my own lens.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's where the future is going. And if it makes me uncomfortable, I better deal with that discomfort, because I can't draw them into my discomfort so that they can kind of smooth over my discomforts. They have to make me uncomfortable so that things can move forward. And that's what our generation did, I think. We tried to smooth over the discomforts for the sake of survival. Our children don't have that.
Who are you talking to in this movement? Who are you reaching out to? And I'm scared that you're going to say everyone. But who are you trying to reach, and how are you doing it?
So we're trying to reach people where they are. So find people where they are. And where do you find people? In different communities where they congregate with each other, right? It could be at work, could be at a school, could be in a church, could be in a community organization, anywhere where people engage with each other. that's where we want to find them. We're not going to find them there to try and tell them what we think they should be doing, but to say, how do you have this conversation in your own communities? So we've started creating what we call communities based on some of these examples that I've mentioned. And the idea is, once we've kind of touched enough people in the different communities, we then start getting them to engage with each other, right? To say, you've done your own engagements on your own, right? So even the Afrikaner stuff that's happening now, we want them to have their own conversations as the Afrikaners. And if we have to facilitate this race conversation for them so that they can figure it out for themselves, and then we take them and say, okay, here's a bunch of people from a village or a township, now have this race conversation with them, and would have done the same for the others. And that's what we're trying to do. The other thing we realize is talking is not enough. We've done enough talking. Everyone is exhausted with dialogues, right? Is to try and identify communities that are already doing certain things that lend themselves to social cohesion, right? As a community, we want to fix our church, we want to fix our roads, we want to do this. Bring this conversation as the basis of why things are the way they are for them, and therefore what they need to do to make it sustainable. And as a result, government has to come into these conversations. You can't.
That's the death of your organization. Maybe the end of this conversation.
No, not really, my friend, because I can tell you now, if you engage with it at the right level, that the people, the communities that are dealing with their issues are the ones who say to, local government people, this is what we need from you. This is what we need. We're not going to local government people and say, this is what you should be doing for people. You almost have to do a bottom up, which is harder work. Mm-hmm. And it's the work that I think as South Africa we've been lazy to do. It's the bottom up, everyday incremental stuff that adds up.
What are you getting? What kind of feedback are you getting in these conversations that you're having with these all different groupings of people?
Everyone thinks the timing is right. Everyone thinks finally someone has the courage to have this conversation around race. Some of the people that I know say, are you crazy to put yourself in it? Like you?
Guilty as charged.
Yeah. And I'm like, but I'm it. So are you. So is the next person. And if I'm not going to get in the ring, we're all very good at talking from outside the ring. We don't get in the ring and say, in my own little space, how do I box this conversation? How do I deal with this conversation? So people are very receptive to the discussion. And what we are finding is that people are already doing stuff and they feel like these conversations just kind of lays the foundation for the why. It brings in the context of why. One of the things that we do is what we call human bridge circles. We go to Cornhill, remind people of where we come from.
Constitutional Hill. People who speak in phrases like Cornhill in Braamfontein, yes.
Sorry, yeah. And we take you there and we put you through an immersion of where we come from. I do these tours and I call them leadership tours simply because it's not about telling you the history. I'm not a historian. I use the symbols of this history to talk about the context of today and what it means for people who are leaders. And when I say leaders, I mean you are a father in a household, you're a mother, you're a church leader, whatever it is in every context, how this context is important to understand why this work is important for all of us. And for me, what that does, that mindset shift that I told you, starts with the individual. Can do it for corporates, which is mostly who we do the immersions for. But I always make the point, I'm going to nudge you as a human being. I'm going to even offend you as a human being. And I always say I'm an equal opportunity offender. All of you, black, white, Zulu, Xhosa, Tsonga, Venda, you will be offended at some point because all of us are either guilty or complacent, minimum, in this stuff and why we find ourselves where we are today.
I wish I had thought actively about this question before today because I would have brought the names.
Yeah.
But I'm sure somebody listening or watching us now will say, but there are many organizations that have been trying to do this thing. Yeah. What makes you guys different? People have tried. There are many centers for reconciliation and justice, blah, blah, all these organizations. Yeah. Even some community stuff that has happened where government has spoken about, what is that thing that you use? Cohesion.
Yes,
I've spoken about it for as long as I've lived. I mean, look, they're very cohesive with money, but, but I haven't seen much, right? So somebody's going to say, but what makes the Human Bridge movement different from what everybody else has tried before?
I think for me, the dialoguing and saying we have to have a social compact, it was a buzzword at some point, is the powers that be from different communities that think they can decide what are the social principles that should govern us as South Africans. They forget who they are doing it for, right? And they don't bring those people in the room. The only reason I'm in the room with this Human Bridge movement is because I realized, Ian is a white man, Nina is a white woman. They wrote this book. It's got certain things that I resonate with to say if we do this properly, we could probably get it right. But who's going to drag them into these uncomfortable conversations in communities that they've never been to, right? And engaging with them. And for me, I think therein lies the difference. When I said bottom up, is find people where they are and engage them on these conversations and give them the sense of I can do something about this, right? I can take I have my own agency about things that are important. If what is important for me is to feed my children, what do I do? Do I start a vegetable garden? If my agency is to make sure that my children go to school, how do I do that? But if I have to demand a decent school from my government, how do I also do that? So the conversations, as much as race is the underlying factor, they end up engaging on a lot more real issues for those communities and saying, therefore, how do we solve these problems for all these communities? Yeah.
I met you and Ian, and you were telling me about this thing that you guys are trying to achieve. Right?
Yeah.
Have you put a timeline on when we can possibly see a better race kind South Africa?
Yeah. So that becomes a top-down approach if we have to define what we think when the change will happen. Because it's not up to us. We're creating an environment for people to talk about these things, say, what do we do about it, and therefore where to from now. So as a movement, that's why we called it a movement and not an organization, right? A movement, there's no ownership that the Human Bridge owns these conversations. Yes, there are certain things that we facilitate, but we want it out there, and we want it to happen in communities in the most real and organic way for them. So for us to define when we think you'll start seeing a social cohesion from a race perspective is almost like this KPI stuff that we sometimes do in organizations, say set targets for yourself until, then you're chasing the target instead of the impact. This is impact work. You can't define, and quite frankly, I even think this will happen not in your and my lifetime.
Speak for yourself, please.
I'm speaking for both of us because you're even older than me, so you'll go first, my friend. You know that, right? I'll bury you.
So, as I uncomfortably move to the next issue on this matter, I was fascinated by something that you want to do, right? You want to run 21-day challenges on social media on racial healing. And I like doing things because I was going to ask you, what do you want people to do actively to start shifting from where they are or where they're not supposed to be?
So in all the doing, there's one thing that has power as well, is storytelling. And if you want societies that are empathetic to each other, empathy comes when I can get where you're coming from. Those challenges would include storytelling where people talk about their own experience with race. And for someone else who is, if it's a black person in a village talking about what race means to them and their experience with it, someone sitting in the leafy suburbs of Hyde Park watching this and saying, wow, I didn't think that is possible. What does that do to those two people? The one feels I'm being heard, my story is out there, my story is valid, and my story is important. The other person hears, gosh, here's a perspective that I never understood. What does that, now that I know this, what do I do differently tomorrow? Sometimes it's as basic as that. It's not as complex or complicated and we think we're solving the world's problems. Well,
we are solving world's problems, right?
But in the most basic kind of way. That's what I mean.
At the weekend, in bloody Paris, a tennis player loses, and she makes a racist statement,
exactly.
right? Like, you would have lost my previous opponent.
Exactly.
Who is
White.
She's not saying it, but we're getting what she's talking about.
Is that hierarchy of human value, right? In her mind, Coco is a good tennis player, but she's a black
But she's not
woman.
equal to me.
Yeah.
She's good, but not equal to me.
She's sitting down there,
Yeah.
and I would have had better opportunities to be able to win this
And
match.
therefore, I ask you, based
Yeah.
on that,
Yeah.
if we're still seeing this at that level,
Yeah.
my response to this thing is that she's Eastern European.
Yeah.
Because the fact is, racism in that part of the world is just,
It's real.
real.
Yeah.
I mean, even in Spain, black footballers in Spain go through hell,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If this is still happening all over the world,
Yeah.
what hope in hell does the Human Bridge movement have about us not going or not staying where we are?
So South Africa is unique in all this with our racial dynamics in that we are majority black, right?
Yeah.
In Spain, they are majority white,
Yeah.
right? So they have the room to be racist and get away with it, right? In South Africa,
Racists get away with it here
they
every
do.
day.
No, but what I mean is if we build the momentum around this pushback around these are the things that we don't accept from a race perspective as a society. There's so many black people in this country, enough of us to say if half of us and all the white people, because all the white people will not even be half of us, right? Half of
No,
us
they're
and
not.
all the white people decide, you know what, let's just not do anything that is harmful from a race perspective. Even just that will be enough to start shifting the dial because we don't see each other with that hierarchy of human value, but we start seeing each other as people who could be equal. But that equality comes with a lot of history that needs to be undone. And I think therein lies the real work, to say everyone deserves a fair chance. We have a constitution, we've got the preamble, it says all these amazing things, right?
Excuse me.
Unless we act them out, and the healing part comes from that, heal the divisions of our past. We say it in our constitution. We haven't done that. We don't even know what those divisions are, except we think it's black and white, when actually there's also then the economic impact of that black and white, my friend. So for me, there's a lot more deeper conversations that we need to have before we can even start saying, is BEE the right tool to bring this equity for black people?
What I find missing in all these things, even in the Constitution, and I think that's how people get away with murder, is thou shalt not do this, or this is important. We are equal, but there's no how.
Yeah.
The how is missing,
Yeah.
and somebody could hide behind that. So what do you expect me to do? And we
Yeah.
hear that a lot.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And I mean, we have to collectively figure out that why, that how, And for me, this is where I don't know that the how can be dictated by anyone except a collective of people who think, I can do this, I can do that, I can do that, I can do that. And then through that, because it won't be one thing. South Africa is complex. Well, the world is complex generally. Yeah. So you can't expect linear solutions. You can't expect the solutions to come from one angle only. It will be a collection of a lot of things that have to happen that get us to where we need to go. There's this project now happening here in the space, the Josie My Josie project,
Yeah.
right? If you think of how it all started, to say we need to revive Bram, Joburg and whatever, big money came together and they said, yes, we're going to do this. The social cohesion of how they talk to the homeless people here, they talk to the prostitutes here, the hawkers here.
You talk to prostitutes?
Well, they have to.
Okay.
Because that's how you create social cohesion.
Yeah.
You can't bring your top-down stuff. For me, that's probably the one part that will make this project sustainable. That by the time you are done with it, you've created a community of people who are interested in the success of Josie. Not because it was some people who had money and ideas who started it, but because it's become our own. Right? And I think we need a lot of these kind of things happening in different spaces. Josie has proximity, access to resources, that always helps. If we can do that in a village in rural Limpopo somewhere and succeed, then we'll start seeing the change that happens.
I like the Josie My Josie concept from this point of view.
Yeah.
That it does not seem to be a matter of self-interest for these people who brought in the money.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I like that part.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, when the city is working well, their businesses will do well too,
Yeah.
and they'll be safer and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
generally they're
Yeah.
saying,
Yeah.
we all deserve to have a good Johannesburg, right?
And even that self-preservation is okay if it's directed in the right kind of way,
Yeah.
right? But for me, what I think, for instance, the Human Bridge movement could help with this kind of project is bring in the conversations
Yeah.
around
So because
why
they're
do
coming
it.
up with activities, but we
Yeah,
need conversations.
exactly. And
Yes.
this dialoguing about why this is important, about why the complexity of Hillbrow today is the reality of who we are as a country, and this black on black violence. And here I talk about people from other, coming from other African countries as well, that we are fighting amongst each other. Right, and we're busy because our own government is failing us, and we the scarcity and we this black on black violence. But we don't go to Centre and say Louis Vuitton, Gucci, go back where you come
Yeah.
from, right?
Yeah.
So there's and all those things can only surface when we have conversations. So, but what have we also internalized as black people to end up perpetuating the very things that we want to liberate ourselves from?
You know what I find strange about race issues, in particular in this country? By the way, I can only say this country. What else do I know?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't understand how white people have never really realized that those among them who try very hard to coexist with black people are the safest,
Yeah.
are the loved.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when I was still young, there was this teacher who taught at a technical school in Jabulani.
Yeah.
And he cycled home.
Yeah.
We used to see him cycle into Soweto and cycle out. He probably would have lived not far, like a Rodiport or stuff like that.
Yeah.
And this guy was loved,
Yeah,
right? He
yeah.
was not in any danger
Yeah,
of any sorts.
Yeah. And I think that's what it is. We don't understand the concept of what safe means because we think our safety is we are better off with those that look like us than we not. You and I are probably seen by black people more as traitors
I've been told that before.
than white people are, right? I remember at some point in my corporate career being asked to go to parliament when the EFF just came into parliament to talk about some of the stuff in the industry, you know. And yes, because I was a black person, they thought, you know, these guys will listen better.
Yeah.
I refused. I said, actually, a white man is better off going to justify these things because they expect it from you. Me, they'll crucify me because it's like, sister, how do you even try and justify these things when you are like us? And so sometimes it's also important to understand that when we try and do certain things as for this cohesion, it's not about saying get someone who looks like you to go and tell people who are fighting you to defend this issue. You know, Ian is a white man in his 70s. You know, I say to him, there are certain things better said by you to your fellow white people than I can ever say because I'll just be an angry
I
black
can't help
woman.
but draw parallels
Yeah.
with what just happened at the Oval Office.
Yeah.
Could it be the same thing? That
Yeah.
you will hear these guys more because they look like you, they think like you, they play golf with you.
You know, and once that is done, you know, it's like this thing in corporates where the corporate would say we can't find good black people, right?
Yeah.
What they're saying is we can't find those that think like us.
Yeah.
We can't find those that look like us. When they do find you, and then they say, but yeah, it's only you, you are the different one. I say, well, trust me to go and find you good black people. Because if you believe in me, then you should trust that I can go and find them, you know. And I've seen that. And then they kind of get stuck there because it's this thing of letting you in. You know, they say if you're a black woman, if you're in the boardroom and there's only one of you, you are a token. If there's two of you, you've got a friend. And if there's three of you, maybe you've got a little bit of a club going, right? Because half the time is the numbers game rather than what is it that we're trying to address. So all these nuances, or is it white on white, black on black, black on white, how do we create this cohesion and these conversations amongst that? That's the complexity of it all.
With complete respect to Ian and Nina, who are founders of this organization and your colleagues, isn't race a white issue in South Africa? Shouldn't they be dealing with their racism than us reaching out to white people and saying stop being racist or whatever, like, you know, as if we are complicit in this thing?
Yes, it is. And a lot of them are starting to realize that it is their thing. They have to have their own AA meetings.
Yeah.
And
I think so.
And win themselves off this concept of this hierarchy of human race that they think they are better. You know, you find white people who are struggling with being ordinary now. right? Because they grew up with the privilege of being better. As much as they do that, we must deal with our own internalized oppression. The things, the barriers that we still hold up, and no one is saying it's still the case, right? We have imposter syndrome. We think we're not good enough. You know, we minimize ourselves most of the time. You know, we must also have our own AA meetings so that by the time we get together, all of us, there's that understanding.
But you and Ian are saying, let's get together. But I'm not seeing the AA meetings happening.
They are. So one of the communities that we've now agreed we're going to do, especially after the AfriForum Solidarity conversations, was actually get Afrikaner groups to talk amongst themselves. There's a group in Cape Town that are starting to do that. As white people on their own saying, guys, what are we doing? They are bringing people like, I don't know if you know Lydia Rauch, whose grandfather was in the apartheid regime, you know, Verwoerd up to de Klerk. And she grew up with racism in her own household. Her father became a priest and he started working against the system using the church, right, and raised these 3 daughters the way he did. And I don't want to speak on behalf of Lydia, but some of the things that she's saying about whiteness, I'm like, finally someone gets it. You know, she says...
I thought we were going to use this wrong word. Like, oh, we say finally.
No, yes. Finally, yeah. I've got a sense of occasion, my friend. I know that I'll be very in circulation after this. And she talks about this experience of, you know, black people get grouped. You know, you have an experience, you know, the WhatsApp groups. If you don't know this, is because you are it. If you live in a suburb, there's WhatsApp groups, and then they'll say, BM walking with BW.
What's that?
Black men walking with black women. And it's a warning to the
So black men should never work with black women?
Well, they're walking in our suburbs. They can walk in their township, in their village, but not here. When they're here, we flag them, right? Those kind of things that you do in those WhatsApp groups, that's what she talks about. She talks about when a guy is in the queue, a white person is in the queue to pay a checkers or wherever. The teller is black. This person is racist to the teller. If she comes as a white person, she must understand that she still represents that racism to this black person. And that she can't say, I'm an individual, I'm different from the next one. They're very quick to individualize themselves, but they group us. You know, it's white and previously disadvantaged. We're all a blob, black, colored, and Indian. We'll figure out the pecking order amongst ourselves. They are exclusively white, and the rest of us are just black, right? And then African, Indian, and colored. And those kind of things that they must figure out for themselves and be conscious about and be able to say, gosh, we can't continue like this.
So I've dealt with what bothers me about the fact that white people should fix themselves. I don't think I have the patience for to go and fix them. As you said, I've lived long to see nonsense here.
Exactly.
But the flip side, and I say this, and not going to be liked for this, but it's probably also a challenge to you. But I think there's also that part that we then allow nonsense to continue. We cauterize it, and
that's what I mean about internalized oppression. We've internalized certain things that says white is better. You get a service provider, at some point I owned a home and I'd get someone to come and fix my plumbing. If it's a black guy, I must negotiate the price so badly. But I don't go to Woolies and negotiate the price for anything, right?
I'm in consulting, my friend. Every time I offer a service to a black person who even works for a corporate, they negotiate. I never get negotiated by...
But that's the thing. We think we're not good enough even to each other.
We negotiate with hawkers. I mean, somebody sells you potatoes for 10 rand. You want to negotiate, like really, a hawker.
And then a simple thing of, I'm going for a jog, right? I once wrote, I call it my TED Talks on my WhatsApp status. That's as far as I'll go with TED Talks. I went for a walk. Every other walker, runner, usually mostly white, will greet me.
They acknowledge other walkers.
But when we walk past the guy who sells grass, and the lady who's selling makoinya and sweets there, they don't greet them. And I was like, guys, don't greet me either then. You know.
But you are the equal from a class point of view.
If I accept that and normalize it, I'm complacent. I am. And I say to them, then don't greet me then, because those people are like me. What makes me unique and different? Because I'm assimilated into your world, and therefore I'm acceptable, I'm probably safer for you. So there's a lot that we also do. The issue with domestic workers and uniform. Prison uniform and at Constitution uniform for women was they must put a duke on because their hair is dirty. Black women.
Yeah.
The others didn't have to. We go and buy it at Pick and Pay. It's still on the shelves today. And your helper comes and you give them this nice uniform so they can cover their head. And when you say that to people, they look at you and I say, yeah, so.
And worse still, my friend, we have made the black domestic helpers accept this as a reality.
Yeah.
That some of them volunteer this, right?
Yeah.
Like, why are you doing that?
They've internalized it,
Yes.
right? And if they understood what it meant and where it comes from, I've got a duke on now because it's cold, bold, and quite frankly, I think I look good on it, as well.
It tends to coordinate very well with your frame and
exactly,
stuff like that.
And I've got a frame for every duke I have. No, I don't.
Oh, wow,
but
okay. That's our next conversation.
But you see, it's also if you continue doing it, can we do it with the right understanding? So that when I'm wearing a duke, I'm not perpetuating something, but actually I'm consciously saying, well, I'll do it anyway. And I'm not your domestic worker either. Right? So there comes in this conflict. In my last corporate job, I had a guy who was the same age as me, 1974. I'm all of 51 people. And he said to me, he was an Afrikaans guy, he said he first saw a black woman drive a car when he was 18. And then when he first met me, he said, not only did you drive a car, you loved cars. I'm a bit of a petrol head, my father's daughter that way, right? And he said, you mess with my mind completely. That level of honesty for me was so real that it created space for me to have this conversation with this guy, but for him to hopefully, the next black woman like me that he sees, doesn't become a mess with his mind. Mess with his mind, my friend. Yeah. So for me, those are the things that are real today. Our children are dealing with it differently, my friend, and let's not even go there.
And I wanted to talk about the generation now. They called what? Millennials?
No, gone past.
I don't know these things. Who are the young people? The my 2000. Now I'm going to keep my 2000.
Yeah.
As we get to the end of our conversation, pardon this, what conversations should we be having with them? And this is a complex thing, right? Again, 94% of them are still stuck in the townships and in the villages and stuff like that. Yeah. But this 6% of our children who go to these private schools who are assimilated and they're equal and they're integrated. What conversations about race should we have with them, or should we have any conversations with them about race?
So I find in my own experience with the young people that I get exposed to is the experiences that they have when they're in those spaces. And then when they bring those home, then you kind of give them the context, right? Of, so this is what you are actually dealing with. An example of a child who might be mine or not, who went to a camp somewhere and a white boy said, you're so pretty, if only you were lighter. And in my mind, I think the boy was saying, if only you were white.
Of course, that's what he meant.
Right? And sometimes it's those little things that when they bring them home, you give them the context, right? Some of it, we are behaving it to our children without even realizing. And as they get older, they'll tell you, but you've done this before. You've said this before. And you're like, I wasn't being black conscious in any way. I was just being real in the experiences that I'm having. So the more real we are, the more they can also engage with their experiences in a more real way. And the more they can call us when what we think is real is just a figment of our own imagination and we're just trying to taint their world. So what conversations? Let them bring the conversations to us. At some point, can we just sit back, especially with things like this, and let the young people bring the conversations. We have a role to protect them, but we don't have a role to be helicopter parents and try and think we can shape the world for them.
They don't always bring up these issues, right?
Yeah.
And I think, again, I keep on saying our children, because fact is they're more privileged than their peers who are in the villages and in the townships, right? And they, therefore, because of this privilege, they get oblivious to some of the things that are happening that they should be talking about, but they're not talking about.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you an example.
Yeah.
Both of my children went to schools that were predominantly white,
Yeah.
right? One was a Model C, the other one was a private school.
Yeah.
And I always observed, if I went for sports things or for debates and stuff like that, you would observe what I know. This is blatant racism. Right? You see it. The roles get given more to the white kids, whatever, blah, 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 whatever happens. You know, when they sport, the black kids get more substituted than the white kids. All those things, right?
Yes.
We know this is systemic racism. It's not just stuff that happens.
Yeah.
But my son would not have raised it. Never did.
Yeah.
My daughter never raises the things that I still see. And I'm saying, so when they're not having those conversations with me, do I have the agency to say, are you aware you're living in a country that does this? And
I think when it happens to them, even if they don't see it, sometimes it's okay to do that. You know, I had an example where in primary school, you know, this awards on a Friday for children. They call you on a Wednesday and tell you your child is getting an award if you can come to assembly. You get there. I'm telling you, this teacher, class teacher, calls this black child's name so wrong that the wrong child.
This is a class teacher. This
Class
is somebody
teacher.
who's
She
this kid
teaches
every
them
day.
every day, right? And she butchers the name such that the wrong child stands up. And it's only when the child stands up and she realizes that this is not the right child that she has to backtrack. I think my eldest was in grade 4 at the time. I went to the school principal, white woman, and says, ma'am, this is what is unacceptable. We fought for this freedom so our kids can be here, but they're not here to be erased. The identity, you get them at grade 000, the thing that they have as an identity is their name. And you butcher it, a teacher who teaches them every day to butcher it. So sometimes as a parent, you don't have to have the conversation with your child. You can have the conversation with a system that is doing that to the child.
I'm not going to those people. I'm not going to those people.
Listen, the few times that I did, I'm telling you, it made a difference. The one was an assignment. Go and write about family that's in exile. I think my daughter was in grade 2. And she came back. I said, well, the exile that we have is in Limpopo and we are in Gauteng. You know, I don't have anyone. And then the teacher, who was a young woman who had just come back from the UK, 23, 24-year-old, I spoke to her about it. I said, my daughter has this crisis. She asked in class, maybe 3, including the white kids, only 3 could talk about someone overseas. Only 3. And for her, it was like this moment because she just came back from the UK and this is the way she sees the world. So sometimes some of these things, we can tackle them in ways that just, you almost embarrass people into realizing, gosh, I am ignorant about the environment in which I operate. And I do that quite a lot. I put it in people's faces and let them deal with themselves.
I mean, I know my questions and some of my pronouncements today paint a tough picture, but I know you're doing a good job.
Yeah.
I just sit here because maybe it's old age and thinking, we're never going to change this thing. I get tired. I look at things and, maybe I should be approaching the principal and say, I don't like this kind of stuff, right? But part of me says, when they victimize my kid even more if I raise these issues and even say your father writes porn. But anyway.
My friend, you'll be surprised, but I get you. I get the fatigue, and for me, trying to do it in a structured way like this feels like, I'm chipping at it, even if it's just one little block. And like I said, it's not going to be in my lifetime, not in our lifetime that this change will come.
Well, thank you for the work that you do. Trust me, in spite of my devil's advocate questions, that's what I do for a living. It's what I was trained to do. It's not only that I do it, I was trained to do this. I had to be a cynic. I think it's a great job. I think it's very important that we do this. And as we say, certainly not for ourselves.
No.
It's probably not even going to be for our children,
No.
maybe their children.
Maybe.
We'll start seeing some result, right?
Yeah.
I hope that you succeed in chipping on that block. I hope that more conversations are had. And for those who are watching us, I hope they start getting into the room and having those conversations.
Thank you, my
How do
friend.
they find the Human Bridge movement? You can tell them.
You can just Google Human Bridge, www.humanbridge.co.za. You'll find us. We've got a website. You can subscribe to be part of our communities so we can communicate with you. We've got a WhatsApp group where people can put in anything. We don't have this admin block thing, so everyone can say what they want on that platform, and also nudge us to say, have you thought about this? So yeah, find us on our websites.
And then also subscribe to this podcast, Taking the Rams by the Horns. It's on YouTube. And buy this book. This is a bloody good book. From me, Rams Mabote, goodbye and God bless.
Cut and sound and cut and camera.
Thank you.